She was a rising basketball star who believed in giving back.
She wanted to follow in the footsteps of her mother, who was a nurse.
She was such a giving person.
And her generosity touched the lives of everyone she knew.
That was my protector, my confidant.
She never met a stranger.
So how did she become the target of a vicious attack?
The shooter had stood over her and shot her point-blank execution style.
I couldn't believe that happened.
Was it a jealous ex unwilling to let go?
We are over.
He had been lurking outside.
Or a new flame that burned too hot?
She just wasn't ready for another relationship.
Something just snapped in him.
And when the investigation hits a stonewall, will the victim's own words be enough to catch her killer?
You could hear the actual shot.
Nanuet, New York, a suburban community just 25 miles north of New York City.
Nanuet is what they call in New York a hamlet. It doesn't have a city government of its own.
It falls within the town of Clarkstown.
It's low crime, a good school system, affordable houses, manicured lawns.
Around 9:40 p.m., 23-year-old Angie Despinas has just arrived at the home she shares with her mother and her older sister, Michelle.
Angie had just finished her college courses for the evening.
But something about the house immediately strikes Angie as odd.
We have a sensor light that's on the outside of my mom's home, and the light did not turn on. That's kind of strange because Michelle's car is here, and whoever gets home first will put the switch up.
Inside the house, Angie doesn't see any sign of her sister.
Michelle, are you home? There was no response, just this eerie silence.
But when Angie turns into the living room, she's met with a nightmare.
I saw that she was on the floor and she was hurt, and I tried to call out to her, but she was unresponsive.
Oh my God!
For Michelle Despinas, helping others was her greatest passion.
I've always looked up to Michelle. Michelle was a selfless person. She would literally give you the shirt off of her back. That was the type of person that she was.
Michelle is someone who wanted to dedicate her life to others, to helping them. So someone that people would gravitate to.
She wanted to become a nurse like my mom.
She had a love for people, so no surprise that she would be wanting to go into nursing.
Michelle was just always an outgoing individual. If you looked up people person, you'd see Michelle's picture in the dictionary.
She's very, very friendly, but she was tough. You know, she was into sports a lot. She loved the game, and she was very dedicated.
In her 20s, Michelle's desire to follow in her mother's footsteps came to fruition.
She was attending Rockland Community College in the nursing program there. That was just something that she always wanted to do.
While in college, Michelle kept herself busy.
Michelle volunteered in the maternity ward at the hospital.
She was an assistant basketball coach at Rockland Community College.
The girls that she coached, she had personal relationships with them when they would call her and she would get up and go. It wasn't just an on-the-court thing for her. If you needed that extra help, she was there.
And in the summer of 1994, 22-year-old Michelle met someone on the court that shared her same love of the game. 22-year-old Ken Rogers.
They used to play pickup games on the same basketball court, so they got to know each other that way.
I'm really making it rain out here.
You're not too bad yourself.
I just remember the phone calls. I met this guy. He's really nice looking. He's tall. And they had that commonality in sports. And they kind of just kicked it off.
Before long, basketball pickup games blossomed into something more.
The relationship was a good relationship. going out on the dates and meeting each other's friends and family.
She was smitten with him, and they started talking about advancing their relationship.
But as time went on, Michelle started to wonder if she and Ken were really right for each other.
She wanted to push with her education and her career, and I'm not sure that Ken was trying to do the same thing.
Ken had a job, but he wasn't on the same trajectory as Michelle.
I don't think he was willing to put in the work to match her.
They did eventually start to grow apart and realized it just wasn't going to work out.
After 5 years, Michelle finally ended things with Ken in June of 1999.
She said, I love him, but I can't be with him anymore.
It's never easy breaking up, but you hope that the two of you can eventually move on.
And for Michelle, moving on didn't take long.
Michelle was at a wedding in Connecticut and met a man named Wade Burton.
What brings you to this wedding?
He's a gentleman. He's an easygoing guy. He was fun, and he was genuinely interested in trying to get to know her, and she was excited about that too.
You gonna be able to keep coaching after you graduate?
I'd like to, if I'm not too busy.
Yeah, I understand.
They had a great time getting to know each other and decided to keep in touch.
Wade lived 2 hours away in Connecticut, but the two didn't let that stop them.
They started dating, and Wade made several trips from Connecticut to see her.
She was excited about this new relationship.
She had a fantastic future ahead of her. She was just an all-around good girl.
But less than 3 months after meeting Wade, Michelle's promising future hangs in the balance when her sister finds her unresponsive on the floor of their home.
Once Angie was able to get her composure, she dialed 911 to get help.
Can you all send someone quick, please?
Clarkstown police arrive within minutes.
Ma'am.
I thought that maybe she had fell and maybe hit her head.
But police quickly determine the reality is more gruesome.
Michelle was shot once in the head.
It appeared to be a fatal injury, and police were about to call the coroner.
Then, officers make a shocking discovery.
We've got a pulse.
She was still breathing.
She was still alive.
"27-year-old college student Michelle Despinas had a bright future ahead of her.
She's going to school to become a nurse, like her mom. She's an assistant basketball coach. She volunteers at a hospital.
And after breaking up with her boyfriend of 5 years, Ken Rogers, Michelle found a new love interest, 29-year-old Wade Burton.
Michelle lived in New York and Wade lived in Connecticut, but still they were trying to make it work.
But now, Michelle is in critical condition with a gunshot wound to the head.
The entry was through the right side of her head, exit through the left.
One of the police officers said to me something about her being shot, and I'm like, well, what are you talking about? No one would look to hurt her in that way.
It's unclear whether she will live or die.
So it was then now following the ambulance all the way to the hospital and just thoughts going through your mind like, what's gonna happen? She's gotta be okay. Things like this only happen in the movies.
While Michelle's life hangs in the balance, Clarkstown detectives arrive and begin looking for answers.
The reaction was like, wow, why her?
What could this have been? Could this have been a robbery, a burglary?
It doesn't take investigators long to find a vital piece of evidence.
The investigators found one single 9mm shell casing. They also noticed a bullet hole on the floor under where Michelle's head had been.
Police were actually able to dig the bullet right out of the flooring.
It's consistent to a semi-automatic handgun.
The evidence paints a chilling picture of what happened to Michelle.
Due to the location, it was determined that Michelle was on the floor at the time she was shot.
So what do you think?
The shooter had stood over her and shot her point blank.
Detectives also find signs of a struggle inside the home.
There were some items knocked over or knocked off the tables.
There's blood splatter consistent with a physical fight.
What investigators don't find are any signs of a robbery.
Nothing was taken from the scene. There was nothing stolen.
There was also no sign of forced entry.
Which leads detectives to conclude that Michelle's shooter must have intentionally targeted her.
This was not a random person attacking her. This had to be someone she knew, most likely someone she let in.
But who could that person be?
Hoping a neighbor might know something, police do a canvass from door to door.
And they're in luck.
One neighbor remembered seeing Michelle the day before the shooting.
Michelle was standing outside her house with a man leaning against a white SUV.
The neighbor can't identify the man, but the investigators hope Michelle's loved ones can fill in the blanks.
When something like this happens, the police have to start with the family, ask them what they know.
Michelle's distraught family and friends have gathered at the hospital, awaiting news of her condition.
It was unreal. I was like, this can't be happening. Like, this is my sister.
I could not get my head wrapped around that. This was real.
Despite their pain, Michelle's loved ones agree to speak to the police.
They wanted to cooperate fully with the investigation.
But they don't have any explanation for what happened.
We don't deal with guns. We don't have this lifestyle. How could she have gotten shot?
They didn't know anyone who would want to hurt Michelle.
However, one friend of Michelle's has some information she thinks could aid in the investigation.
Michelle called me earlier and said her last class got canceled.
Michelle had gotten out of class early and was headed home.
They chatted for a few minutes, and that was it.
But Michelle's friend says there was a second call later that night.
She says that she did receive another call from Michelle just before 9:15 p.m.
She sounded really different.
What do you mean?
She sounded scared.
She's practically whispering, "He's outside, he's outside." And before she can say who, the line goes dead.
She tried to call Michelle back several times, but Michelle never answered.
So you don't know who she was talking about?
Well, I can guess.
She says Michelle was having trouble with her ex.
She had a recent breakup with her boyfriend of 5 years.
She said his name was Ken Rogers.
He hadn't taken it very well.
At a hospital in Clarkstown, New York, 27-year-old nursing student Michelle Despinasse is clinging to life with a gunshot wound to the head. In speaking with her family and friends, investigators have identified a possible suspect, her ex-boyfriend, 27-year-old Ken Rogers.
They had been dating for about 5 years. They had broken up a few months earlier. He was not taking it well.
But before investigators can speak to Ken, doctors deliver some tragic news.
The bullet wound to Michelle's head has left her completely brain dead.
Doctors informed her family members that the damage was so severe she would never recover.
Michelle's family now faces an impossible decision. But her mother thinks she knows what Michelle would want.
There was a conversation that Michelle had with my mom maybe a few days before, and she was like, "Mommy, if something ever happened to me, I wouldn't want to be on life support." I don't know if she felt like something was going to happen to her, but that conversation is what made my mom decide.
Her mother had to make the decision to send her on her way.
Michelle wouldn't want people to see her like a vegetable because she's such an athletic person, such a vibrant person, such an active person.
Once they make that decision to take her off of life support, The case is now considered a homicide.
As the sun comes up over Clarkstown, investigators are now searching for a murderer, and Michelle's ex is the first person on their radar.
Clearly, detectives need to speak to Ken Rogers.
They were able to contact him, and he agreed to come into the station for an interview.
He had heard that the police were looking for him.
He's also heard that Michelle is dead.
People have been calling me about it. It's just hard to believe, you know?
Ken seems like he doesn't have anything to hide. He's willing to be interviewed.
The detectives start by asking Ken about his relationship with Michelle.
He admitted that they had broken up.
Ken openly admits that he had not taken it well.
We had some arguments. I just wish I could take it all back, you know?
He may have said things that he regretted, but Ken says that he would never have done anything to hurt Michelle.
In fact, Ken says he has an alibi for Wednesday night.
He said that his friend had worked at a local video store and he had gone to visit him around 7 p.m.
According to Ken, he was at this video store until 10 o'clock at night.
There's someone out there.
Michelle was on the phone with her friend around 9:15, and Angie found her body by 9:40.
If Ken's alibi checks out, he couldn't have been the person who killed Michelle.
All right, well, we appreciate your time, Ken, and you're free to go.
Next, detectives reach out to Ken's friend.
They confirmed that Ken had been with him from 7 p.m. to after 10 that night.
He has an airtight alibi.
With Ken crossed off their suspect list, investigators are back at square one. However, they know from speaking with Michelle's loved ones that she started dating someone new after her breakup with Ken. 29-year-old Wade Burton.
Even though Wade lived in Connecticut, it would only taken him a few hours to drive to Nanuet.
Investigators run Wade's name through their computer databases and don't find anything suspicious.
He had no prior criminal history. He had no arrests, no convictions.
But when detectives check Wade's DMV records, they find something that catches their attention.
DMV records reveal that Wade actually drives a white SUV.
You got it, thank you.
There were witnesses who saw a man in a white SUV talking to Michelle.
Wade was almost certainly the man a neighbor saw with Michelle the day before she was killed.
When detectives reach out to Wade, he agrees to drive over from Connecticut to speak with them.
Wade appears to be upset over Michelle's passing.
It's just crazy something like this happened.
But when detectives start asking questions, Wade began to get defensive.
He had admitted to visiting Michelle the day before she was attacked.
However, Wade bristles at what detectives are suggesting.
You think I was involved in this?
He said, I would never, ever hurt Michelle. And I don't like the insinuation that I could possibly do this.
Wade also claims to have an alibi for the night of the crime.
He said that he was home at his house in Connecticut with his mom and his brother.
Wade's family, his mother, his brother, all confirm his alibi that he was at home in Connecticut.
With both of the prime suspects ruled out, the investigation seemed to be hitting a brick wall.
But then Wade says something that will send the investigation hurtling in an entirely new direction.
Have you looked into Jesse Morton?
Who's Jesse Morton?
Police investigating the murder of Michelle Despinas have eliminated her ex, Ken Rogers, and her most recent boyfriend, Wade Burton, as suspects in the crime.
The detectives were able to confirm their alibis at the time of the murder.
But now, Wade has given investigators a tantalizing new lead.
He asked them if they looked into a guy named Jesse Morton.
Who's Jesse Morton?
Some guy Michelle dated briefly before me.
Wade tells detectives Michelle had just broken up with Ken Rogers and gone on a much-needed vacation when she met Jesse.
Jesse had met Michelle on a cruise to the Bahamas, a little shipboard romance, perhaps.
According to Wade, when Jesse and Michelle realized they lived near each other, they went on a few dates at home.
But their romance quickly fizzled out. And that's when Michelle met Wade.
Thank you, Wade. And we'll make sure we look into it.
Could Jesse have been upset that more didn't come out of his relationship with Michelle? Investigators contact him right away.
When detectives reach out to Jesse, he agrees to come in for an interview.
We appreciate you coming in, Jesse, to talk to us. And can you tell us how you knew Michelle?
Jesse confirms that he and Michelle met on a cruise in the Bahamas a few months earlier.
We had a good time, and we figured we'd keep things going when we got back.
But just like Wade said, the romance didn't last long.
Michelle was hesitant to dive into another serious relationship so soon after breaking up with Ken, so they kept it pretty casual.
She's just broken up from a 5-year relationship. She tells Jesse, I'm just not ready.
Jesse says he respected Michelle's decision. But did he really accept it? Especially after Michelle began dating Wade.
Have you really moved on?
Jesse admits he had hoped that Michelle would change her mind.
You can't blame the man for hoping for a romance with Michelle.
But he assures detectives he'd never do anything to harm her.
Jesse, where were you Wednesday night?
I was visiting some friends in D.C.
So police check, and sure enough, he does have an alibi for being in D.C. at the time.
But as detectives are wrapping up their interview with Jesse, he says something that will shift the focus of the investigation yet again.
Listen, if I were you, I'd be checking out her ex-boyfriend.
You mean Ken?
Yeah.
He said that Ken had been stalking her since their breakup.
Jesse claims he witnessed the stalking firsthand, a few days after he and Michelle returned from the cruise.
Jesse was dropping Michelle off at home after a night out.
As Michelle walked towards her front door, Ken emerged from the shadows.
Ken confronted her and was clearly upset that she was with another man.
Nah, who is that, huh?
It's okay, Jesse. I got this.
You sure?
Ken, I need you to stop this. We are over.
Ken eventually left. But according to Jesse, it wasn't an isolated incident.
Michelle had said that he'd been stalking her ever since they broke up, just being real creepy and everything.
Sometimes she would leave for work in the morning and he'd be outside standing there.
Ken was trying to pressure her to get back together with him.
But regardless of what Jesse says, Ken still has an airtight alibi.
Police had already ruled out Ken since his alibi about being at the video store checked out.
However, when one of Michelle's colleagues from the hospital she volunteered at comes forward, it bolsters Jesse's account.
They came forward to indicate that they had seen and heard Michelle and Ken arguing in the months leading up to the murder.
On one occasion, an argument had turned physical.
Michelle!
Ken?
A witness observed Michelle and Ken having words, and Ken shoved Michelle.
According to Michelle's colleague, the arguments all stemmed from one thing: Ken's relentless efforts to win Michelle back.
The witness was so disturbed by what he had seen that the witness walked up to Michelle and asked if she was okay.
You okay?
Michelle's colleague tells detectives that minutes later, Ken returned, but his demeanor was completely different.
Ken, please just go.
I'm sorry.
He showed back up with a bouquet of flowers, just begging Michelle to take him back.
I'm sorry.
She told Ken that she was not interested in pursuing a relationship, but the harassment continued. That was part of a pattern in the months before the murder.
Ken was intimidating her, stalking her, and harassing her. He was finding out information about who she was dating, where she was going, and was circling her block where she lived.
The harassment had grown worse over time.
Domestic violence doesn't happen overnight. This is something that grows over the duration of the relationship.
And too often, it grows in darkness.
Unfortunately, people who are victims of domestic violence often do not report it for many reasons. They're afraid of their harasser, they're afraid of their abuser, or they just don't want to make an issue out of it. They perhaps blame themselves.
I think we talked almost every day by phone, or she would come to me, I would come to her. She kept a lot of it to herself.
In retrospect, the signs were clear.
I could see her change when he was mentioned or when he would come around. I could see how that made her on the edge in the latter part of their relationship.
It's a feeling of being trapped. It's a feeling of being under the microscope all the time. It's a feeling of having to look over your shoulder because you never know when this person is going to pop up.
They want you all for themselves. That is a type of control that can become completely out of control. If you still love somebody, you might make excuses for them, but there comes a point where people have to stand up and say, no, I am my own person.
On one occasion, Michelle had spoken up.
She came over to my house and she plopped down in the couch next to me. I was like, what's the matter? What's wrong? And she, in such a defeated way, she said, he's going to kill me. And I said, what are you talking about? She said, Ken, he's going to kill me.
Unfortunately, even her best friend didn't realize how serious the situation was.
I didn't take it as literal as it was. I didn't know. My reaction was anger. How dare he threaten you? And she was telling me, no, he's going to do this.
But Michelle never reported the harassment to the police.
Well, if somebody's being stalked, first thing you do is call the police. It's a felony. It's something that the police take seriously.
The police have resources and are there to help in any way that they can, but the important thing is if you have family or friends that you can reach out to do it and to take advantage of the services that are available.
Maybe Michelle would still be here if she would have just said something. We can protect people more if we speak up.
Ken's history of stalking Michelle has investigators convinced they're on the right track. But it isn't enough to overcome Ken's alibi.
Without more evidence, the investigators seem to be hitting a dead end.
That's when detectives receive a package from the crime lab.
CSI had confiscated a lot of items from the crime scene, including an answering machine that was at the home.
You're gonna want to hear this.
And when the messages on the answering machine were transcribed, CSI techs noticed an alarming recording.
The recording isn't a voicemail. It's actually a voice recording that can be activated by pressing a button on the answer machine. When they pop them in the tape player, the detectives are left speechless.
Michelle had apparently pushed the memo button. Everything was recorded.
Michelle spoke from the grave.
Police in Clarkstown, New York have discovered that just before she was murdered, 27-year-old Michelle Despinas pushed the record button on her answering machine and captured the entire confrontation with her killer.
The police listened to the tape that was on the answering machine.
Her voice breaking in terror. You can hear her begin to struggle.
But who was the attacker? To detectives' surprise, they're clued in by Michelle herself.
In her own voice, Michelle is yelling for Ken to stop. Ken, stop.
Can't stop it!
She wanted to capture whatever happened between them on tape.
Then the investigators hear the thud of something falling.
We believe Michelle went to the ground, either by being struck or by fainting.
That followed by a loud bang that sounds like a gun went off.
We hear the fatal shot, and the tape goes dead.
For the detectives, the recording is a game changer.
There is no more compelling evidence than the words of the victim herself naming her own murderer.
she sent the homicide detectives the evidence they needed from beyond the grave.
Now, they hope the tape can be used to leverage a confession.
On the day of Michelle's funeral, Ken attended the funeral, and police asked Ken to go back to the station with them to talk about the case.
Detectives have a tape player ready in the interview room.
Why am I here?
Because there's something we want you to listen to.
The police played the tape for Ken. This was the first time Ken had heard it, and he was quite shocked.
Can't stop it!
Do you recognize that voice?
Ken thinks he's free and clear and suddenly hears the voice of Michelle herself yelling out his name.
At that point, his demeanor changes.
He's horrified, he's upset, but yet he stands by his innocence.
I don't know why she said my name. Because you were there. It wasn't me.
Ken has no explanation for detectives.
He just leaves.
Ken stands up and walks out. The detectives decide to let him go.
The tape alone isn't enough for them to make an arrest.
You have Michelle's words, but what you don't have is a murder weapon, and you still have an alibi.
A friend who owned this video store admitted that Ken was hanging out at the store at the time the murder was committed.
Despite his friend's claim, could Ken still be involved in the murder somehow? Police decide to subpoena his phone records to search for any suspicious calls.
What we noticed was that there were several calls to an individual who lived in Ken's neighborhood in the week prior to the murder.
The police then get in contact with the person that Ken was phoning.
The man says he doesn't know anything about a murder, but he does admit something alarming.
Ken had been speaking to him about purchasing a gun.
He admits that on September 15th, he sold Ken a pistol.
The gun was a 9mm, which was the same type of weapon that was used to kill Michelle.
Just hours before the shooting, Ken bought a handgun consistent with the shell casing that was found at the crime scene.
It's another piece of compelling evidence, but there's still a major roadblock in the investigation.
There's one sticking point left in this case, that video store alibi.
Making an arrest depends on dismantling the alibi, so detectives bring in Ken's friend, Alex Green, to see if he'll stick by his original story.
I don't understand why y'all want to talk to me again.
We've received some new information.
Detectives reveal they have a tape that strongly suggests Ken wasn't at the video store like he claims. And Alex quickly changes his tune.
Ken's friend now admits that none of that was true.
The owner of the video store had lied, and the reason why he lied was he claimed that he had been visited by a member of Ken's family.
He said that the cops would want to talk to me, and I better say Ken was with me that night.
And what if you didn't?
He said, or else.
He was afraid for his life.
So what are you saying now? That you weren't with Ken?
Well, he did come into the store.
He actually did show up to the video store at 7 p.m., like he originally said.
But he left shortly after 8 and didn't come back till 10.
The alibi that Ken provided to police was false.
Police in Clarkstown, New York are building a case against Ken Rogers for the murder of his ex-girlfriend, Michelle Despinas. But so far, Ken has had a rock-solid alibi standing in their way.
From about 7 to 10 p.m., he was talking with a friend at a video store.
But in their follow-up interview with that friend, Alex Green, Ken's alibi is starting to crumble.
According to Ken's friend, Ken left the store about 8:20 p.m. and he didn't return to the store till after 10 p.m.
That opens the window wide for Ken to be able to get to Michelle's house, commit the crime, and get back.
After their interview with Alex Green, detectives are ready to make an arrest, and Ken Rogers can feel it coming.
After hearing the tape, he called and left a message for Michelle's mother and sister, and he said, "I'm sorry, guys, goodbye." Ken then tried to take his life that night by swallowing Drano.
He ended up having to go to the emergency room to get treated.
Unlike Michelle, Ken makes a full recovery.
Ken made an agreement with investigators that he would turn himself into police right after being released from the hospital.
But that's not what happens. Back home the next day, Ken attempts to make a run for it when officers come to arrest him.
Rather than cooperate, he decided to flee.
Ken was trying to jump out a back window to get away. Fortunately, one of the officers was around back.
The fact that he jumped out of the window certainly didn't bolster his case. It just implied guilt. Now, he could have said that he was panicky and he was afraid of the police. He could always use that excuse. But if you want to present a positive image to the cops, the last thing that you do is jump out of the window. It's not a good idea.
Ken was arrested and went to the Rockland County Jail.
With Ken now secured, detectives let Michelle's loved ones know that they have her killer in custody.
They bring him in, and this had to be a very satisfying moment for detectives, obviously for themselves, but more so for the family. You do this job because you want to bring justice and closure to them. So it must have been a wonderful moment when they called the family and said, "We have Michelle's murderer."
I thought that I would be so excited and so happy. It was just more grief. I'm glad they got him, but it kind of solidifies this really happened.
It was a sense of relief to say, wow, he's off the street, so what do we do to get him behind bars and stay there?
The police get some help from one of Ken's fellow inmates at the jail.
While he was in the jail, a person overheard some conversation where Ken admitted that he shot Michelle. Some of the details were details that only the killer would know.
The jailhouse confession is the final piece of the case the police have been building. And in May of 2000, Ken Rogers goes on trial at the Rockland County Courthouse.
The trial focused primarily on the tape. But in addition to the tape, there was an abundance of evidence pointing towards Ken's guilt. First, he had a motive to kill Michelle Despinasse.
According to the prosecution, Michelle was murdered because she'd broken up with Ken.
Since the breakup, Ken had been stalking her and trying to force her to take him back.
But Michelle refused to be intimidated.
He saw his harassing behavior was not working.
Ken found out that she was dating another man, that she would never take him back.
And he refused to accept it.
We are over.
We'll see about that.
Ken was extremely jealous when he found out that Michelle had moved on.
If he wasn't going to have her, nobody was going to have her.
Prosecutors claim the murder was premeditated.
Ken planned out exactly what he was going to do.
Then he put his plan into action.
On the day of the murder, he bought a 9mm handgun.
He goes to the video store to start establishing an alibi.
Next, Ken drove to the home Michelle shared with her mother and sister.
Whether Ken was going to the house to harm another man in Michelle's life, or Michelle, only Ken would know that.
When he arrived, police believed that Ken lurked outside to make sure no one else was there.
Eventually, Michelle realized someone was outside.
When Michelle spotted him, that's when she called her friend.
But Michelle didn't initially realize it was Ken.
There's someone out there. I can see him.
until he began banging on her front door.
Kid, you can't keep doing this.
Why can't I keep unaware of the violence that he had planned against her? Michelle let Ken inside the house.
She was still willing to let him come into her house and talk to him, hoping that he would leave her alone.
But Ken had something else in mind.
He confronted her about the fact that she was seeing other men.
An argument ensued. I don't like the fact that you're dating someone else. I still want to get together with you. Things got very heated.
How many times do I have to tell you?
Tell me what?
It's over, kid.
That's when Michelle pressed record on the answering machine. And what happened next was caught on tape.
The argument quickly escalated and it turned into a physical struggle.
He knocks her to the floor, stands over her.
Michelle was on the floor begging for her life while this man stood over her and shot her in the head.
The coroner determined the shot was fired within 1 to 3 inches of Michelle's head.
Ken fled immediately after the shooting.
He headed right back to the video shop to establish his alibi.
Ken also covered his tracks by disposing of the murder weapon.
Sometime after leaving the house, he got rid of the gun.
The weapon is never recovered, but even without a literal smoking gun, the jury is convinced.
After 2 hours of deliberation, the jury finds Ken Rogers guilty. If it wasn't for Michelle's quick thinking, he might have got away with this.
It amazes me that Michelle had the presence of mind to press the memo button on her answering machine to record what was happening.
But regardless of the verdict, Ken doesn't back down.
At the sentencing, after he was convicted, Ken was given an opportunity to speak to the court. He came up with a conspiracy-laden theory about him not being involved.
He still maintains his innocence even at this point, but I think he's the only one he is fooling in this case.
Michelle's family is outraged.
Things got very emotional, and Angie Despinas got very upset, and there were some words exchanged between them.
For him to say, you know what, I'm going to play the role of God and take your life because you're not with me. I think it's demonic. It's evil.
Like the family, the judge is in no mood for Ken's lies.
Judge Nelson admonished him for putting the family through that again.
The judge was not a fan of his.
The feeling is mutual.
Ken did not want to hear what the judge had to say.
His reaction to the judge was like, just sentence me and get me out of here. I don't have time for this.
So the judge wastes no more time and sentences Ken to 25 years to life.
He would be eligible for parole in August of 2024.
Michelle's family and friends have mixed feelings about the outcome of the trial.
You have that sense of relief, but then there's a possibility that after serving a certain amount of time that he can come out. I've never come to terms with that.
He shouldn't be allowed out. I felt like he should have gotten life. She was loved by many. We all lost her.
They don't believe he feels any remorse for what he's done.
I don't think he's sorry that he did it. I think he's sorry that he got caught.
I don't think that Ken loved Michelle. I think Ken saw the advantage of being with someone like Michelle.
At some point in that relationship, Michelle ceased to be a woman loved. Michelle became Ken's possession.
But Michelle Despinas was much more, and not just to her family, her friends, and the girls she coached.
This is a man that she trusted. This is a man that she went to parties with. This is a man that she loved, and he betrayed her. And you have to wonder if that betrayal didn't start much earlier in the relationship. You have to wonder if Michelle was willing to give Ken the benefit of the doubt 2 years before they broke up, 3 years before they broke up. But she was a kind person. She wanted to be a nurse. She was a healer. And somewhere in Michelle's mind, one has to think that she thought that she could heal Ken, and she couldn't do it. There was nothing more to be done with Ken, but she still allowed room for Ken in her heart and in her house. Ken took advantage of it, and as a result, it got her killed.
Michelle was a vibrant member of the community. She worked within a maternity ward, bringing life into this world, and her life was taken from her.
How many people would she have helped? So much she could have accomplished. Ken took that away not only from her, but he took Michelle away from the rest of the world.
I want women to know that Michelle was your average person, your best friend. This situation can happen to any woman. When you're feeling unsafe in a relationship, you have to talk about it. You have to find that person that you can share with what's going on. Don't keep it to yourself.
Michelle always went above and beyond to make sure that others were okay, even if she had to miss out on something. That's what this world is missing without Michelle.
After one failed relationship and 2 kids, she'd found the life she'd always wanted.
Gotta kiss the cook.
Thank you.
She had finally met Mr. Right.
He was an Army veteran. He was 10 years older than her.
He could really take care of her and her children.
Mom! Until one of her children makes a terrifying discovery.
There's red stuff everywhere, like on her face and on the pillows.
The scene inside that room was horrible. She was beaten to death.
It was horrific.
So can you just open your mouth wide, please?
The bloody scene points detectives toward a possible killer.
This murder, it was personal. They start looking at people close to the victim.
It turns out to be a long list of suspects.
Is he in him?
Yes.
We had these cheating issues.
They both had been stepping out on each other.
You guys have an intimate relationship.
I was hoping this was a phase.
I just feel not moving.
But only one suspect holds the key to the truth.
You have a key to the house? I gave her all the keys back.
Once you find the first lie, you're on the right person.
September 14th, 2017. It's Thursday morning in Orlando, Florida, one of America's top travel destinations.
People from all over the world come to Orlando to visit.
The city sees more than 70 million visitors each year.
But this September, Orlando's dealing with something far more challenging than an influx of tourists.
Hurricane Irma devastated a lot of the community here in Orlando.
It's been 1 week since the storm made landfall, and the city is still struggling to recover.
A lot of us couldn't go back to work. A lot of people was displaced.
And the schools were closed.
We have hurricane days for up north, you have snow days. It's not safe for the school buses to be out. It's not safe for kids to be walking to and from school.
Kids don't mind. The next day I don't have to wake up and go to school.
But that morning, one Orlando child woke up to a nightmare.
911, you need police or medical, ma'am? Medical?
The caller, who was only 12, is calling about her mother, 29-year-old Krista Hall.
She's supposed to be to work at 8.
It's 11:30. There was some concern there.
The car is still there. They haven't heard Mom moving around the house.
She went, knocked on the door, then opened the door.
Mom!
And found Krista laying face down.
There's like red stuff everywhere.
She said it was sticky like paint.
I went to go touch her skin and it was like really cold.
Mom!
Growing up, Orlando native Krista Ortiz had a disposition as sunny as the Florida weather.
She was a happy child. I didn't have any problems with her.
Krista was someone who was all about family. She was a loving person.
Krista enjoyed just being around her family. She also dreamed of having her own one day.
And she wouldn't have long to wait.
She fell in love with her high school sweetheart.
And next thing I know it, she's sleeping with him.
She became pregnant with her daughter at only 17 years old.
And not long after giving birth to her daughter, Krista got pregnant with their second child.
Krista and her boyfriend, they really, really loved each other, and they were very, very committed to one another.
Having the kids and the white picket fence and the husband, she wanted that.
But for that, she would have to wait.
Krista and her boyfriend split up after the birth of their second child.
Sometimes those things that really feel like love and feel like fun, they change as we get older.
After the split, Krista was determined to start anew.
She moved with her 2 children to Alabama.
Moving to another state for a fresh start feels right because I don't have to face this person. I can create an entire new life.
And to her surprise, she soon met someone new.
Having the faith to allow yourself to be vulnerable again, to open yourself up for love again is a huge task. But sometimes we meet someone who help us break those walls down.
His name was Tommy Hall.
He was an Army veteran. He was 10 years older than her.
This guy swept her off of her feet in a matter of a few days.
He's someone that feels stable. He feels trustworthy.
Hey, Tommy! Tommy, come play with us!
How about you?
Yeah, sure, I gotcha.
What most impressed Krista was how quickly Tommy took to her children.
There we go. Great catch.
The thing that made this relationship so special is that Tommy took on the role of stepdad to Krista's kids. He treated them just as though they were his kids.
Meeting someone that accepts you for you as well as your 2 children. This feels right. This feels really good.
They had an awesome relationship.
The couple married and soon had a child of their own. Then they moved back to Florida.
They decided to move back to Orlando to be closer to Krista's family.
It seemed that Krista's dream of a happy family had finally come true.
I taught her how to be a caretaker, and she was a very good one. She was happy with the kids.
Krista thought she had found this knight in shining armor, this Prince Charming, the one who she'd been searching for her whole life.
Mom!
But it will take more than a knight in shining armor to save her now.
Her 12-year-old daughter is on the phone with 911 telling them what she discovered.
Her mother is unresponsive in the bedroom.
She's like really stiff.
Most kids would be in shock, but this little girl had the wherewithal to call 911.
I want you to do me a favor, sweetie. I want you to get everybody, get all the other kids, and I want you to go outside, okay?
Okay.
She's inside. Please help.
When first responders arrive, all 3 of Krista's children are waiting in the front yard.
The paramedics head inside to attend to Krista.
But there is little they can do for her.
She's gone.
This wasn't an accident.
Someone definitely killed her.
The back of her head had blunt force trauma.
29-year-old Krista Hall was starting over in Florida with her 3 children and new husband, Tommy.
She met Tommy, who was 10 years older than her and a retired Army vet.
Tommy swept Krista off her feet.
He looked at Krista's kids like they were his own. He embraced the role as a stepfather.
There we go. Great catch.
And they'd soon had a child of their own.
She had that storybook, picture-perfect life.
Mom!
But now, Krista's 12-year-old daughter has made a shocking discovery in her mother's bedroom.
She was going in there just to check on Mom.
She's not moving. She's stiff and unresponsive.
And there's blood everywhere.
Are you with her right now?
We're in the dining room.
She made a frantic call to 911, and she told dispatchers that she discovered a horrible scene in her mother's bedroom.
My mom, she's in the bedroom. You gotta help her.
Inside the house, the first responders confirm that Krista is dead.
She's gone.
It appeared that the victim had been beaten to death.
When homicide detectives arrive on the scene, they determine that the killer likely attacked Krista as she slept.
They walk in the room and they see Krista in her bed with the sheet halfway over her. There was no evidence of a struggle in the bedroom.
She likely never saw it coming.
To detectives, it looks as though she had been struck repeatedly in the head with a heavy object.
The back of her head was caved in. She also had an injury to the front portion above one of her eyes.
They couldn't even tell which injury actually killed her.
There's also no sign of the murder weapon.
If it's a spontaneous situation, it could have been any object, a hammer, a bat, a lamp, anything that's near.
Whatever it was, it appears the killer took the murder weapon with them.
Detectives noted blood droplets on the floor, in the hallway, and crossing the living room.
The blood driplets going out the front door indicated that whatever object was used was removed from the home.
However, it appears that the killer had left something behind.
They noticed something strange under her body.
It looked like someone took saran wrap, wrapped their fingers with it, and then they've put some type of duct tape around it to keep them there, like a makeshift glove-looking device.
Despite the killer's precautions, the detectives believe there are subtle clues about their identity.
There were no signs of forced entry into the home.
The killer either had a key or the door was unlocked.
This murder, it was personal. She was beaten to death with a blunt object. And that means that that person was very angry with her.
So they start looking at people who were close to the victim.
To find out who that might be, the detectives turned to Krista's mother.
When I arrived at the house, there was security everywhere.
She had rushed over to the house because her granddaughter had called her and said something was wrong with Krista.
She told me that her mom was laying in the bed with blood around her mouth.
According to Krista's mother, she'd last seen her daughter the night before.
She came to the house about 7:15.
Krista's mom told investigators that she seemed happy, everything seemed like it was going well.
Everything except her marriage.
Her mother admits that her daughter has been going through a lot.
Because after 6 years, her marriage to Tommy Hall was in trouble.
They're jealous of each other.
It wasn't the romance that she was looking for.
And they're seeing other people.
They both had been stepping out on each other.
Detectives investigating the murder of 29-year-old Krista Hall have learned that the mother of three had a turbulent relationship with her husband, Tommy.
Mom basically broke it down and said that there was infidelity on both sides.
How long has that been going on?
For the last 3 or 4 years.
But according to Krista's mother, Alvesa, the trouble started long before then.
If he wasn't smoking weed, he was walking around the house with an attitude about something. He was neglecting her. He was going around sleeping with girls. So Krista started going out with other men.
So it's kind of on both ends, both kind of
Yes.
seeing other people, stepping out of the relationship on both ends.
Yes.
However, Alvesa also says that her daughter and Tommy didn't split up. At least not at first.
For a while, Krista and Tommy both tried to make it work.
They even talked about having an open marriage.
According to Krista's mother, her daughter and Tommy's problems had only gotten worse.
They were at odds with each other.
It had gotten to be too much.
And Tommy moved out of the house around June.
And he still has keys to the residence?
I don't know. She hasn't spoken to me about Tommy in a long time.
Okay.
Still, detectives suspect the separation could have something to do with her death.
There was so much jealousy and resentment.
Both were out cheating on the other. So this opened the door to a possibility of suspects all across the board.
When the detectives ask for more information about the new man in her daughter's life, Krista's mother tells them all she knows.
She told detectives there was some guy by the name of Eric or Earl who her daughter recently mentioned.
Is he a black male?
Black male, about 6'2", 3", low-cut hair.
I knew she was seeing this guy, but I didn't know how far she was going with him.
Okay. And how long has that relationship been on for?
Not very long, about within the last 2 months.
Detectives asked if Krista's new guy had access to the house.
They're trying to figure out who can come and go in that home because there's no sign of forced entry.
But Alvesa doesn't think the new guy has a key.
She's not 100% sure.
But she did say, according to Krista's daughter, neither Tommy or the new boyfriend had been by the house the night before.
I asked, and she stated that there was no one in the house last night or this morning that she knows of.
Ma'am, might we get a word with your granddaughter as well?
Maybe.
Krista's 12-year-old daughter confirms what her grandmother already told them.
She says that everything was totally normal at home yesterday.
It seemed like a normal night until they woke up the next morning and made that startling discovery.
Wake up.
However, she does say that her mother had gone to see her friend, Keely.
She got home at around 11 at night.
Then, while the detectives are still conducting interviews, Krista's estranged husband, Tommy, arrives at the scene.
What happened?
We need to ask you some questions.
He told investigators that his brother had called him and told him that something bad had happened to Krista.
He's like, she committed suicide.
Tommy says that Krista has attempted suicide in the past.
She took like a gang of pills. I was at work and I was talking to her on the phone. I was like, why are you slurred? Why is your voice like...
She had to be rushed to the hospital.
And now he fears that she'd succeeded.
We was going through rocky modes as far as our relationship and whatnot.
For now, the detectives hold off from telling him Krista was murdered.
Instead, they ask Tommy about the couple's relationship.
He confirms that he and Krista had separated, but he says they're still cordial.
She said that she didn't feel the relationship, we needed some time apart. Okay, no problem.
He said he moved out and found a place to stay a few blocks away.
In his eyes, he was making it work with Krista for the kids because he didn't see those kids as stepkids. He saw all of the kids as his.
Even though the older two have a different biological father.
You have a good relationship with your kids, it seems, right?
Oh, yeah.
But he admits that he and Krista hadn't been faithful to one another.
He admitted that both he and his wife were stepping outside of the relationship and cheating, dating other people.
She was like, I don't really want to play a wife role. I don't want to be a wife. I just want to live life.
She wanted to have freedom.
She was like, you know, I was going around screwing all these guys, whatever, because I just wanted you to just leave me.
But Tommy says he just couldn't do it.
I still love this woman, man. I was hoping this was a phase she was going to get over again.
He said he thought it was just a temporary thing.
I was like, if I just go and get my own place, then maybe she'll get her share of the dudes and she'll see that I'm the perfect man for her.
And according to Tommy, he'd done his best to show it.
He would stop by the house on a regular basis in order to make sure the kids were doing well and to spend time with them.
You have a key to the house?
No, sir, I have no keys to the home. I gave her all the keys back.
Okay. When was the last time you were here?
Kids, your dad's here.
Tommy says it was right before Hurricane Irma hit.
The kids wanted to be with me for the hurricane. I came over here, I picked them up.
According to Tommy, it wasn't just that they thought it would be more fun.
They told him their mom had a new boyfriend that was coming around.
They wanted to be with me because they didn't like him.
Homicide detectives have just learned from Krista Hall's estranged husband Tommy that their children had a bad feeling about the new man in her life.
The children expressed to their dad that they didn't like him and they didn't want to be in the house with him.
Tommy says he wasn't too happy about it either.
Tommy, like any protective father, had a problem with Krista's new boyfriend coming and staying the night, especially since he didn't know anything about him.
So he arranged with Krista for the kids to stay with him during the hurricane.
How did you go and get the kids from the house?
I came and picked them up from here.
He said when he went to pick up the kids, he saw the guy peek out the window.
Is he in there?
Yes.
Let me meet this guy you have around my kids?
Not today, Tommy.
Because I'm like, if you're going to push a man on my kids, then I need to know who this man is.
Tommy says Krista finally agreed. And when he brought the kids home after the hurricane, he got to meet her new guy.
Welcome back, my babies.
Krista introduced him and said his name was Ernie.
However, Tommy said he never got Ernie's last name.
He really didn't have too much to say. He was kind of standoffish.
Look, I'm be straight with you.
I shook his hand. I had a conversation with him. Before I left, I shook his hand again. No problems.
But the detectives wonder if Tommy had a problem with Krista, especially now that he's met her new man face to face.
If they're in that mindset of we're working on getting back together and then find out you're dating someone else and this could possibly be serious, that could be seen as cheating or he could feel totally duped.
Which could have thrown him into a rage.
They would like to know where he was last night.
Tommy explained he had been dating someone new, a woman by the name of Courtney Lawrence, and she spent the night with him.
And what time did you leave your house?
Oh, she woke me up this morning.
He said he left his house around 5:45.
Tommy explained that he's a roofer and he had to be at work at 6 a.m. on the job site.
Detectives will need to follow up on his alibi, but Tommy appears more than willing to cooperate.
He also told investigators that he was willing to allow them to have his cell phone data and submit to a DNA test.
The detectives arranged for Tommy to come down to the station that afternoon so they can collect a DNA sample.
Hoping they can get a last name for Krista's new boyfriend. They head back to their office to start reaching out to her friends.
And one of the first people they talk to is Krista's friend, Keely Talbot.
Keely is the friend that Krista supposedly had gone to see the night before the murder.
What do you think happened to Krista? I don't know. That's what I was trying to figure out.
However, she's at least able to tell them that Ernie's last name is Reynolds.
Keely says she met Ernie because when the hurricane blew through Orlando, she and her husband Mike had decided to spend the weekend at Krista's house.
They were all there like a double date, and they all were there having a good time together.
You were there from Friday to Monday.
However, Keely denies that Krista had gone to see her on the night before her murder.
Krista was casually dating a few guys, so maybe Krista told the kids that she was going over to her house in order to protect them from hearing about yet another guy she was dating.
Or another woman.
Investigators were surprised to hear that.
They asked Keely, so Krista dates women?
Keely's response was even more surprising.
Yeah, she was my girlfriend.
Detectives investigating the murder of Krista Hall have learned that the mother of three was not only juggling an estranged husband and a new boyfriend, she was also in a relationship with her friend, Keely Talbot.
She actually met Krista on a dating site, and even though both were married women with families, they decided to explore their bisexuality.
We were together 3 years.
Keely says she never told her husband, but she figured that Mike just kind of knew what was happening because Krista and Keely spent so much time together.
Their relationship was pretty serious.
Keely admits they considered leaving their husbands and being together.
But in the end, they never took the next step in their relationship.
She said she did hope after Krista and Tommy split up that maybe that was her chance to be with Krista. But Krista also wanted to continue dating men.
And that's okay with you, her seeing all these guys and stuff?
It has nothing to do with me.
She was okay with it as long as Krista didn't date any other women.
But is she being completely honest?
They're wondering if she was actually jealous of the new relationship that Krista had with Ernie.
It wasn't like that. It was just like, you know, hey, as long as you there for me, I'm there for you. I don't care. It's not a problem for me.
She says she was happy for Krista.
Although Keely does admit that she'd gone by Krista's house the night she was killed.
Keely told detectives that she works as a rideshare driver, and she got a call from Krista while she was out driving a client around.
You had a missed call at 11:09, and then you called her back at 11:42.
And when Krista didn't answer, Keely ran by her house.
But she says she didn't go inside.
When I pulled up there, her lights in the house were off.
She told detectives she didn't want to wake anyone.
But she also said that if she had, maybe Krista would still be alive.
It's just like deeply like here in my folders, I feel.
To detectives, Keely seems sincere. But is she telling the truth?
Maybe she's more jealous with her girlfriend's new relationship than she's letting on.
Or maybe she's trying to protect someone else.
Could Keely's husband be responsible? Maybe he finally put two and two together and realized that they were more than just friends.
But when the detectives reach out to him, that doesn't appear to be the case.
When detectives ask about Krista and Keely's relationship, he seems confused. As far as he knows, they were just friends.
Thank you.
So after talking to Mike, detectives turn to Krista's new boyfriend, Ernie Reynolds.
Ernie seemed absolutely devastated at the fact that Krista was gone.
I barely got to know her.
Ernie told detectives that he was looking forward to the future. He was in love with Krista, despite all of the drama with Krista's estranged husband.
When did you last see Krista?
I talked to her Wednesday night.
They had their regular FaceTime call from about 1 a.m. to about 1:30 a.m.
The next morning, he sent several messages to Krista, messages that weren't returned, so he figured she was just busy at work.
But then I found out she was, you know.
He was very cooperative. He went as far to say as he would do anything to help the detectives solve this murder. He gave consent for DNA and to have his phone analyzed as well.
So if you can just open your mouth wide, please.
Despite that, the detectives are unable to rule him out just yet. And the same is true for many people in Krista's life.
Given the dynamics, any one of them could have had a motive.
So detectives subpoena the cell phone records for Krista, Keely, Ernie, Tommy, and Tommy's new girlfriend, Courtney. And when the records come in, they're able to shorten their suspect list.
Keely and Ernie's phone records corroborate their stories.
The cell phone data appeared to corroborate Tommy's story too.
Tommy's location data places him at home until 5:40 a.m. That's when he said he left for work.
But according to the tower data, he didn't go straight to his job site.
The data shows that he was actually at Krista's home.
And that isn't all the cell phone data reveals.
His girlfriend Courtney's phone was pinging off the same tower.
It proves that she was there. It proves that she was on scene.
Was Courtney in on this?
She's either a witness or she's a suspect.
Having caught Tommy in a lie, the detectives bring him and his girlfriend in for questioning.
They confronted Tommy first.
You're telling me you were never at Krista's house that morning? No.
They take that evidence and they put it right in front of him.
The records don't lie, man. The records say that the phones were there at the same time.
He said that there's a reason for that. I had to drive by the house. I wanted to check on the kids.
I came up, I tapped on the window.
Krista, it's me, open up.
But according to Tommy, there was no answer.
I hit again. I said, hey, this is me. What's going on? She didn't say anything.
Tommy tells the detectives that getting no response from Krista, he tried the front door and discovered it was unlocked.
I went in, I looked around the corner, I seen the blood trail. First thing I did was I beeline to the room.
Baby?
He says that's where he found Krista beaten to death.
I just stood there for a minute. I stood there for a second, and then when I turned around, I went in the kids' room, and the kids were still sound asleep.
Then when he realized the kids were safe, Tommy said he ran.
You know, I don't know what I was thinking at that point, but I didn't want to, you know what I'm saying, put myself into that situation.
Investigators are not buying it.
Did you kill your wife? No. Did you bash her head? No, I did not.
And then he changes his story.
She was just supposed to talk to me.
He pointed the finger straight at Courtney.
What was that? They got a fight.
Confronted with data from his cell phone, Tommy Hall has admitted that he was at his estranged wife Krista's home when she was murdered. But he says he wasn't the one who killed her.
Did you stop? No.
He says his girlfriend Courtney wanted to go and confront Krista.
What are you doing?
I'm just gonna go talk to her.
Next thing you know, the girlfriend's just rushing in there.
I figured she was just gonna wake her up or, you know, I don't know. Come on, man.
He continues to maintain his innocence, but they're not buying it.
Did you guys go over there and say, let's go do this?
No. No.
Tommy claimed he was just outside smoking while the women were arguing inside when all of a sudden he heard a commotion.
I just heard it going hard, and then I just wham, 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 wham. So I went back to the door.
According to Tommy, that's when Courtney came running out.
She ran by me, and I was like, what's going on?
He went in and saw what she had done.
Tommy said the only thing that he could think to do was to get Courtney away from the scene of the crime.
And can you tell me on your kid's life that she did this? Oh, my kid's life.
Even so, the detectives aren't just going to take his word for it.
What people will do is they'll massage the story just a little bit. They'll change it just a little bit, then they'll change it a little bit more.
When the detectives turn to Courtney, they confront her about the phone records.
They sit down with her and say, look, we know that you were there.
To their surprise, Courtney admitted that she was there.
She says that Tommy asked her to follow him over to his wife's house.
She says she did go, but she parked about a block away and stayed in the car.
Did you go inside the house?
No.
So you've never been inside the house?
No.
She says it was Tommy who actually went inside.
I'm gonna show you a picture of something, and I want you to look at it very carefully and let me know if you recognize these objects or anything like that. Is that okay?
They showed her pictures of the makeshift gloves that they found at the crime scene.
What is that?
What do you think they are?
It looks like drugs wrapped in some tape.
Detectives know that somebody's lying.
Is it Tommy or is it Courtney?
Detectives know one way to find out.
Would you be willing to supply your DNA to compare to evidence found in the house?
Yes.
Detectives collect a DNA sample from Courtney before wrapping up her interview.
Come over here, check this out.
Detectives send both Courtney and Tommy's DNA to the crime lab.
When the DNA results come back, they get the answer that they need.
They show that Tommy's DNA is inside of these finger wrappings.
It's more than enough to charge Tommy with Krista's murder.
I was so happy. I just didn't understand why it was taking so long.
And when the case goes to trial in February of 2020, the prosecutors are confident they can secure a conviction.
They have a mountain of evidence. They have the DNA, they have the phone location data, and they also have witness testimony that describes how jealous he was at the fact that his wife was out dating other people.
Tommy just couldn't deal with the fact that Krista was moving on.
And once he realized that there was another man coming into the home, he lost whatever feelings he had for her, and the feelings from love turned to anger.
Eventually, that anger led to violence, and Tommy snapped.
On the morning of September 14th, 2017, he had Courtney follow him over to his wife's house.
Whether he always planned to frame her for the murder isn't entirely clear.
Whatever reason she came along, the prosecutors believe she remained in her car while Tommy slipped inside.
Tommy had a key to the house, and he was able to get in.
He snuck in, got plastic wrap and duct tape from Krista's kitchen for the finger wrappings, and then used some sort of weapon to beat his wife to death while she slept.
Krista never had a chance.
Then, leaving Krista's 3 children asleep in their beds, he slipped out again.
He left her body there for her 3 children to discover.
Mom!
This is a cold-blooded murderer with no empathy for his child or the children that he helped raise.
But for all the care he took to conceal his fingerprints, he'd made a fatal error.
He left some of his makeshift gloves at the scene.
Tommy's DNA is on the plastic finger wrappings.
Despite that, when it's the defense's turn, Tommy's attorneys stick to his claim that Courtney is the killer.
They're saying that Courtney is the one that murdered Krista because she and Krista had something between the two of them.
I'm just gonna talk to her.
He needed an scapegoat. He needed somebody to throw this onto and he was going to sacrifice her. Reasonable doubt, that's what they're looking for. They're trying to create an alternate theory of the crime. They're trying to just put that little bit of question in the jury's mind of whether what they're seeing is really what it is.
But when the case goes to the jury, there's no getting past the DNA evidence.
It shows that he was there. He was at the murder scene.
And he was convicted of first-degree murder.
He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Tommy shows little emotion when the judge hands down his sentence.
He didn't say anything. He sat there like, whatever, I didn't do that. But you're the one who caused them. And I'm sorry you took my daughter from me. And I'll never see her again. And you deserve everything you got.
But that's little consolation for those still struggling to deal with the horrific damage Tommy did.
There's other victims, those children.
He did leave her there for the children to find.
Even his own son.
We still talk about it. And he cries every time because he can't believe that his own father would do something like that to his mother.
They had to endure that. They had to see that. That's the last memory of their mother they'll ever have.
She was a single mother who was climbing towards a bright future.
You couldn't help but to smile being around her. She wanted to work even harder to provide a better life for herself and for her children.
She never expected to find love in her own neighborhood.
Hey, you need some help?
But when it showed up on her doorstep, she was like a moth to the flame.
They immediately hit it off. She loved that he was the strong, silent type.
However, the whirlwind romance would be cut short by an unthinkable tragedy.
She is cold to the touch, and rigor mortis has already set in.
This was one of those cases that was an eyebrow raiser from the start.
Her body didn't have any visible signs of trauma, no gunshot wounds, no stabs.
As investigators pore over the case, the mystery only deepens.
Someone has carved an obscenity in the side of her car.
He was just one of those guys that couldn't seem to stay out of trouble.
He was not all the way right in the mind. His mind is gone.
Detectives would soon learn that a twisted mind can be just as dangerous as a lethal weapon.
He's not telling the whole story. He has a psychotic disorder. His anger and controlling tendencies were spiraling completely out of control.
Thursday, February 4th, 2016. It's lunchtime in Waco, Texas, a quiet community located halfway between Dallas and Austin.
It's a city dubbed the heart of Texas.
It's been a community experiencing quite a bit of growth in the last 10 or 15 years. It's a community on the rise, but very close-knit one.
However, one close-knit Waco family has spent their day in a panic. At 12:30 p.m., Latasha Kenton arrives at the home of her 29-year-old niece, Nikki Walker.
Well, I just got here. No one has seen or heard from Nikki in the last few days.
Nikki hadn't called to check on her two kids, who was staying at her grandmother's for the week, while Nikki worked late shifts at her new job.
She was really a devoted mother, close to her children, and she would make phone calls to them when she was on break from work. She didn't make her typical routine phone calls, which raised red flags to the family.
Her family was growing increasingly concerned, so her aunt decided to check the home.
Okay, well, I'm gonna try to get inside. Well, her car is here, so that's a good sign.
She saw Nikki's car parked in the front yard.
I'll keep you posted. All right.
And when Latasha approaches the vehicle, she notices her niece inside.
Nikki!
Inside the car, Nikki is in the front seat, but she is unconscious and unresponsive.
Latasha makes a desperate call to 911. But when police arrive, it's clear there's no saving Latasha's niece.
As soon as they touch her body, they realize, unfortunately, they're too late.
No pulse.
Oh, Nikki!
She is cold to the touch, and rigor mortis has already set in. Nikki Walker is dead.
Unikia Walker, also known as Nikki, carried a radiant energy with her wherever she went.
Nikki had a very infectious personality where you couldn't help but to smile being around her.
She was bubbly and fun-loving and eager to enjoy new experiences. Nikki had 2 children that she adored.
As a single mom with 2 little mouths to feed, Nikki was no stranger to hard work.
Hey, girl. Yeah, I can cover for you. Let me just make sure my grandma can watch the kids, okay?
For a while, she worked as a customer service representative for a Texas utility company.
But she wasn't satisfied with where she was in life, so she wanted to work even harder to provide a better life for herself and for her children.
And that's what led her to decide to go back to school and further her career.
She enrolled in Texas State Technical College.
Nikki's goal was to get a job in security technologies, and before long, she'd do just that.
She started a position at a well-known aerospace and defense company.
She had built a really good life for herself.
And in the spring of 2015, she'd find a partner to share it with.
Hey, you need some help?
That's okay. I got it. Thank you.
Yeah, let me help you out here.
36-year-old Marcus Scott lived in Nikki's neighborhood, just a couple streets away.
Marcus was the strong, silent type.
Nikki was drawn in by his sweet and gentle demeanor.
Thank you. It's been a long day.
Oh, yeah, no problem. I live right down the street if you ever need anything.
Good to know.
Between work, school, and being a single mom, Nikki didn't get out very much. So dating someone who lived in her neighborhood seemed like a perfect scenario.
It seemed like a match made in heaven.
But for long, they were inseparable, hanging out all the time.
The kids liked spending time with him as much as she did.
Nikki wanted a man who would stay by her side and help her raise her children.
Nikki really saw a future with this individual and thought they could be together.
So how did she end up dead in the driveway of her own home?
Judging by the fact that her body was cold to the touch and rigor mortis had already set in, police can tell Nikki has already been dead as long as 48 hours.
But what happened to her?
Her body didn't have any visible signs of trauma, no gunshot wounds, no stabs, no abrasions, none of those things were seen.
This was one of those cases that was an eyebrow raiser from the start. So from Jump Street, we're talking about a bit of a mystery as to how she got to where she got and what had happened to her leading to her death.
Police began to speculate that maybe Nikki passed away from some type of medical issue or possibly even a drug overdose.
However, on the exterior of Nikki's vehicle, investigators locate a telling clue that suggests otherwise.
Detectives, come take a look at this.
Someone has carved the word in the paint.
That is someone who has thought about this. They know what they're going to do.
At 29 years old, Nikki Walker had already built a great life for herself in Waco, Texas.
With 2 healthy children, a good job, and a good man by her side, she had everything that she ever wanted.
But now Nikki has been found dead inside her car. And based on the initial evidence, it looks like she was murdered.
Detectives, come check this out.
On the exterior of the vehicle, someone has carved the word in the paint.
Clearly, someone with a motivation or animosity toward Nikki had damaged her car.
And a closer look at Nikki's body reveals additional signs of foul play.
Once detectives check her eyes, they see burst blood vessels, telltale signs of strangulation.
Strangulation is an incredibly intimate act.
It requires a killer to stare into their victim's eyes for several minutes while they choke them.
Someone has to be extremely motivated to actually strangle a person to death. Whoever committed this crime had personal reasons to do so.
Inside the vehicle, investigators notice another clue.
And that's the blood stain on the passenger seat of the vehicle.
There aren't any injuries on Nikki that would produce a blood stain, so investigators believed that the blood that they found belonged to Nikki's killer.
Crime scene technicians take photographs. They swab the vehicle inside and out, and specifically, the blood stain was swabbed.
They don't locate any other blood evidence inside the home.
Meanwhile, Nikki's family is becoming more and more desperate for answers.
Many of the victims' loved ones have already received the news and are showing up at the scene.
Her family was actually in the process of filing a missing persons report right before her aunt discovered the body.
So sorry for your loss, but please know we're going to do everything we can to bring Nikki's killer to justice.
Thank you.
Nikki's relatives are just devastated from the news that Nikki has been murdered.
None of her family could believe that someone as kind and caring as Nikki could have been harmed in such a way.
You know, she didn't deserve this.
Because the way the murder was committed was so personal, the police asked Nikki's family if she had been involved in any type of dating relationships.
Romantic partners are almost always the place to start in any type of homicide investigation.
She was seeing a guy from the neighborhood named Marcus.
According to Nikki's family, they had only been together for about 6 weeks.
However, detectives still know that Marcus is someone they need to talk to right away.
We'll be sure to keep you updated.
So after leaving the crime scene, detectives head straight to Marcus's house.
When detectives approach the front door, they can smell food cooking and hear a TV playing inside the home.
Marcus Scott?
It's obvious someone is inside the house, but when they knock on the door, no one answers.
Marcus, it's the police. We need to talk to you.
They make several attempts to get Marcus's attention, but he never comes to the door.
To the investigators, this is a huge red flag that Marcus may be hiding something. Why would an innocent person refuse to answer the door?
Waco homicide detectives investigating the murder of Nikki Walker are attempting to speak with her boyfriend, Marcus Scott.
Hello, anybody home?
They can hear the TV playing, but he refuses to answer the door.
They can't help but wonder if he is avoiding them because he has some type of involvement in this crime.
Without a warrant, the only thing detectives can do is instruct officers to continue patrolling the area and wait for Marcus to emerge.
We're headed back to headquarters. Let us know if you make any contact.
And later that evening, investigators are in luck.
At about 9:30 p.m., the patrol officer notices Marcus standing outside with another man.
Marcus Scott? Yes, officer.
The officer approaches Marcus and informs him that detectives are looking to speak with him about Nikki's death.
Detectives came by to talk to you earlier this morning. You didn't answer the door. Why not?
Oh, that was you guys? Oh, my bad. I was a little preoccupied.
Marcus told them that he heard knocks earlier that day, but he was in the bathroom and he couldn't answer the door. By the time he came out, he said they were gone.
Marcus says he was devastated to learn about Nikki's untimely death.
We weren't together for long, but man, I really cared about her.
Marcus appears to be cooperative.
He said he wants to speak to the detectives to clear his name.
Okay, well, you can come back with me to the station. Who's your friend here?
That's just my boy Leland.
Leland?
Yeah.
Leland Marsh?
The officer recognized the name Leland Marsh.
ID.
Leland has a warrant out for his arrest for a burglary charge.
He was just one of those guys that couldn't seem to stay out of trouble with the law.
Guess what, Leland? You get to ride with me, too. Turn around, put your hands behind your back.
What? Man.
Back at police headquarters, the detectives investigating Nikki's murder sit down with Marcus Scott.
Tell us about your relationship with Nikki Walker.
Well, I met her about a month ago.
He proceeds to tell detectives that they had an on-again, off-again relationship, but they maintained a friends with benefit type relationship.
Did you kill Nikki Walker?
No, absolutely not.
Do you know who did?
No, I wish I did, but no.
He wasn't able to provide any other leads.
Detectives are still suspicious of Marcus, but they'll need more than just a hunch to solve this case.
Not only was Marcus Nikki's last romantic partner, but it also appears that Marcus was avoiding the detectives.
There was some investigating to be done, but they were believing that Marcus had something to do with it.
All right. Thank you for your time, Marcus.
No problem.
And the next morning, detectives learn there's an inmate at the county jail with some promising information for them.
Homicide. Oh, he does. Interesting. Yeah, we'll be right down. Gotta go.
The informant is none other than Marcus's friend, Leland Marsh. Leland admits it's been difficult for him to come forward.
This is one of my childhood friends. When I was homeless, his mother took me in. You know what I'm saying?
You really were close. But when Leland heard about what happened to Nikki, he started to get an uneasy feeling.
There were some things that were not adding up about Marcus's actions in the hours before Nikki was killed.
Investigators believe that Nikki was killed sometime between Tuesday night and Wednesday morning.
It had to be Tuesday night. I dropped Marcus off at a half, like maybe 1 in the morning.
But Leland tells police that when he dropped Marcus off, Nikki was not at her home.
Don't let anybody hear, man.
It's okay, I'll wait.
She used to get off work at, I think, 12:45. And Marcus would be like, well, drop me off over here. And I'm like, Marcus, bro, what, you just gonna be sitting outside till she come?
Right.
And he's like, yeah, she'll be in here in a minute.
Leland says that he offered to drop Marcus off at a later time when Nikki was home, but Marcus refused.
Hey, you sure?
Yeah, man, I'm good. I'll see you later.
All right, peace.
I remember I talked to him the next day, which was Wednesday. I talked to him, I'm like, bro, what happened with Lil Mom? You stayed over there last night? He's like, nah, she never came home, so I walked to the house.
So she never came home?
Yeah, he's like, she never came home.
And on Thursday, Leland says he found out the terrible news.
When I passed by the house, I'm like, damn, they had yellow tape out, and I'm like, man, I hope nothing happened. So I got out and I talked to this old lady, and I'm like, man, what happened?
Is Nikki okay?
She's like, my niece is dead.
While he was still at the scene, Leland immediately called Marcus.
I called Marcus, and he answered the phone. I'm like, bro, that girl dead, bro. Nikki dead, bro. You know, so somebody killed her, bro.
But to Leland's surprise, Marcus didn't react the way he thought he would.
But Marcus was not showing no emotion.
Yeah, man. I mean, it is what it is, you know?
Marcus was like, we just broke up.
I understand that you just broke up, but this is someone you this is a relationship with.
Every day.
You're going to have some kind of reaction.
Something about that didn't sit right. Even though they were no longer a couple, something as horrific as a homicide should at least warrant some type of reaction.
Leland admits that even when Marcus and Nikki were together, their relationship was rocky.
Based on the arguments that he heard when they were together, Nikki felt like Marcus was smothering her.
Marcus, this is just becoming too much. I need space.
She had started meeting new people, going out to clubs. She was like, Marcus, you want me to be around you 24/7. I got my own life, I want to have fun. I'm 29. Let me have some fun.
According to Leland, Marcus could not bear to give Nikki the space that she needed.
What, you trying to sleep around or something?
Marcus thought that she was messing with another dude.
Is there another man?
Another.
He was not okay with that. That was the tipping point.
Waco detectives investigating the death of single mother Nikki Walker are speaking with Leland Marsh, a friend of Nikki's ex, Marcus Scott. According to Leland, Marcus was exhibiting suspicious behavior in the days before Nikki's body was discovered.
For investigators, what Leland is saying raises even more red flags around Marcus.
It had to be Tuesday night. I dropped Marcus off at a house like maybe 1 in the morning.
Detectives can now place him at the scene of the crime within the time frame that Nikki was killed.
Additionally, Leland claims that days prior to her death, Nikki told Marcus she needed some space, and he didn't take it well.
Is there another man?
Another.
She was establishing that this wasn't working and that she was ending things. He was not okay with that. That was the tipping point.
Marcus is not all the way right in the mind. If you know him from like when I know him to now, that's not the same person.
Well, do you know what happened to him?
And he went to prison.
In the early 2000s, Marcus spent 7 years in prison for weapon charges and organized crimes.
He came out of prison, he's just not the same person.
What's changed?
Everything. I don't know how to explain. He sit down, then he'll jump up, turn around in a circle, and sit back down. Or he'll get out the car, just stand there and look down the street. I don't know if his mind is gone,
After speaking with Leland, detectives are convinced that Marcus was involved in Nikki's murder.
Why didn't he mention getting dropped off at Nikki's house on Tuesday night?
The aggression, the attachment style, those are all very alarming.
And later that afternoon, Nikki's cousin Floyd Jordan comes forward with even more damning information about Marcus.
That man was no good for her.
Floyd tells the police that Marcus was abusing Nikki.
She didn't break up with him for nothing. He's dangerous.
Floyd tells the detectives that the reason Nikki and Marcus's relationship ended was because of Marcus's violent tendencies.
Tell me!
Nikki came to the realization that not only was it dangerous for her to be around Marcus, but it was dangerous for her kids as well. She didn't want them to be around that.
But Floyd says Marcus refused to take no for an answer.
He was stalking her and showing up to her house unannounced.
He would show up there. He would wait for her in the dark, wait for her at midnight.
She caught him peeking in her windows before.
Floyd tells detectives the situation came to a head on Tuesday night.
She called me Tuesday in the middle of the night, freaking out.
Nikki told Floyd that she had just recently driven home from work and found Marcus waiting for her on her porch.
Oh my God, he's on my front porch. What should I do?
You need to get out of there.
Detectives realize what they're hearing from Floyd directly contradicts what Marcus told Leland.
Marcus told Leland that Nikki never came home that night after he dropped them off.
I told her to come pick me up and I'd help get him to leave.
He felt like he could protect her if Marcus tried anything.
So she picked me up and we went back to the house.
Marcus, what are you doing here?
I just want to talk to you. That's all.
No! It's late, and I'm over this.
Come on, man. Go home.
But once again, Marcus refused to let up.
Marcus's entire demeanor shifted.
Man, who the hell you think you are, huh?
Just leave!
He was threatening her and basically laying out what he was going to do if she left him.
I'm gonna leave. Whoa.
Waco detectives investigating the murder of Nikki Walker are speaking with her cousin, Floyd Jordan. Floyd has just revealed that Nikki's tumultuous relationship with her ex, Marcus Scott, came to a head on the night of February 2nd.
Man, who the hell you think you are, huh?
Just leave!
I'm gonna leave. Whoa.
He was threatening her and basically laying out what he was going to do if she left him.
You're not leaving me. You know that, right?
Marcus, just stop, okay?
You're gonna regret it if you try to leave me. I promise you that.
Cool it, man.
Hands off me. Leave.
Floyd tells detectives that eventually Marcus stormed off in a rage. But it wasn't the last they heard from him that night.
Floyd says Marcus continued to text Nikki threatening messages.
Oh my God.
Damn, this dude isn't letting up.
What if he comes back?
The messages were so alarming that Nikki was afraid to be home alone.
Why don't you stay at my place tonight?
Okay, yeah. That might be for the better.
Let's get out of here.
Floyd tells detectives that the last time he or anyone else saw Nikki, she was leaving his house at 4 a.m. the next morning.
All of this wasn't just a coincidence. It was Marcus. I know it was him. He killed Nikki.
Floyd speculates that maybe he went back to her house to wait for her to show up there.
Whatever option you go with, to him, Marcus Scott was guilty.
Thank you so much, Floyd. We really do appreciate you coming forward with all this.
He became essential to our case because now we've got a timeline where almost immediately before the murder's committed and her body's found, we've got our suspect threatening to do her harm.
After speaking with Floyd, detectives do a deep dive into Marcus's past.
They knew, according to Leland, Marcus had been to prison before, but they didn't know the extent of his crimes.
They find that Marcus has an alarming, decade-long criminal history, including convictions for deadly conduct, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and engaging in organized criminal activity.
And as they continue their investigation, detectives uncover another shocking piece of information.
In a substantially similar case, the detectives learned that in 2015, Marcus had broken into an ex-girlfriend's house and threatened to assault her.
When detectives contact the ex-girlfriend, she admits Marcus became violent with her on several occasions.
And she says that she eventually broke up with him because of how violent and possessive that he became.
Just like with Nikki, Marcus would show up to her home unannounced and would begin following her around as well.
To detectives, it's evidence of a disturbing and escalating pattern of behavior, but it's still not proof of murder.
They knew they had to talk to Marcus Scott again and confront him with the information that they had learned.
So detectives bring him in under the guise of a simple follow-up interview.
Marcus, thanks for coming back in.
No problem.
And this time, something on Marcus's leg catches their eye.
Marcus has scratches on his shin.
He had long pants on when they previously interviewed him.
What happened to your leg? That looks pretty painful.
When the detectives ask how he obtained these scratches, Marcus tells them that they are the result of an accident he had with a screen door.
It scraped me pretty bad.
They become even more convinced that Marcus is not telling the whole story.
Remind us again, when was the last time you and Nikki got together?
Sunday.
You sure?
Yeah.
We have reason to believe that's not true.
He doesn't mention anything about Leland dropping him off at her home on Tuesday night.
You saw her Tuesday, didn't you?
You two had an argument that night?
What? No, I never saw her on Tuesday.
Well, you willing to take a polygraph test to prove that?
Sure.
Although reluctant, Marcus does agree to go through with the lie detector test.
Did you get into an argument with Nikki Walker on Tuesday night, April 2nd?
No.
Did you harm Nikki Walker?
No.
Initially, he had denied any involvement, denied any violence in the relationship in the past, but then he fails the polygraph.
However, when detectives confront Marcus about the polygraph test results, he still doesn't waver.
All right, Marcus, tests show you're being deceptive. It's time to start telling the truth.
No, I didn't kill her. We got into a few arguments. Yeah, but nothing too crazy.
Marcus admits that he had been violent with Nikki in the past. He stated at one point he actually hit Nikki to get off of him during a fight that they had, which Nikki initiated.
And then he admits to play choking her during an argument in January.
Play choke?
Yeah, but you know, we were just messing around, that's all.
He continues to maintain that he had absolutely nothing to do with the murder.
And unfortunately for investigators, the results of the polygraph can't be used as evidence in court.
There's really good reason for that. Polygraph examinations, they're not a lie detector test. What they do is they measure sweat levels, heart rate, things that generally can be associated with deception. So they certainly have their value. They're just not admissible in any courtroom.
Therefore, with no confession or any other hard evidence, detectives will be forced to let Marcus go once again.
While Marcus's lies and his troubling relationship with Nikki point towards guilt, the detectives have no forensic evidence to prove that Marcus committed this murder.
But before he leaves, detectives obtain a sample of Marcus's DNA.
It could be months until they receive the results from the DNA evidence found at the crime scene, and eventually those months turn into years.
The Waco DPS crime lab, where we send blood to be analyzed for DNA, it simply takes time. It's a time-consuming process, and across the state of Texas, Waco included, forensic crime labs are overloaded with the amount of things that they have to test.
Nikki's loved ones start to grow worried that they will never receive justice for what has been done to her.
But then, on March 19th, 2018, more than 2 years after Nikki was killed, there's a breakthrough.
Detectives received word from the crime lab that they have completed testing on the specimens submitted in Nikki's case.
Marcus's blood was found at the crime scene. There's no longer any doubt on who's behind this murder.
The investigators believe that the blood came from the cut that he had on his leg.
Armed with their smoking gun, detectives file a warrant for Marcus's arrest on April 6th, 2018.
Marcus is taken into custody that same day.
He refuses to answer any more questions and asks for a lawyer.
And while justice for Nikki is long overdue, it looks like her loved ones may have to wait even longer.
Marcus is deemed incompetent to stand trial due to a psychotic disorder.
He punches a nurse who's trying to provide him with treatment.
Waco investigators finally have Marcus Scott in custody for the murder of his ex-girlfriend, Nikki Walker.
2 years went by without them being able to convict anyone for Nikki's murder.
But now they have DNA evidence to prove that Marcus's blood was in Nikki's car. Along with other circumstantial evidence, this case seemed like a slam dunk.
But in February of 2020, the case hits another roadblock.
During a pretrial hearing in February of 2020, Marcus is deemed incompetent to stand trial due to a psychotic disorder.
In order to be incompetent, there has to be proof that an individual does not understand the consequences of decisions that they can make.
As a result of this diagnosis, Marcus's trial is paused until he is able to get the necessary treatment.
What usually happens in Texas is that somebody who is held incompetent, they get sent to a state hospital until they regain competence. Some people never regain competence, some people do.
All right, Mr. Scott, open up.
But even in the hospital, Marcus's violent tendencies emerge.
He punches a nurse who's trying to provide him with treatment. Ultimately, Marcus was charged with aggravated assault on a public servant, which is a third-degree felony.
3 years later, after undergoing additional psychiatric evaluation, Marcus is finally deemed competent to stand trial. But a new curveball hits this already muddled case.
Marcus goes blind during his time in the hospital due to glaucoma.
Marcus was a very different person than he was when he committed this murder. He was almost completely blind. It's a challenge from the outset because when jurors walk in, who they see seated at counsel table next to his attorney is a fairly nondescript, relatively thin blind man.
However, prosecutors warn jurors not to be fooled.
Prosecutors paint him as a vengeful ex who could not stand the rejection from Nikki Walker.
They point to Marcus' previous relationships and arrest history as proof that his anger and controlling tendencies were spiraling completely out of control.
And we had family violence experts come and testify to those dynamics and what jurors can expect statistically when it comes to this kind of homicide. Any individual in a domestic relationship with a strangulation event in that relationship is 700% more likely to ultimately take that person's life.
And prosecutors believe that's exactly what happened to Nikki.
Marcus had become physically aggressive with her.
Marcus himself admitted to their arguments becoming violent at times.
As far as Nikki was concerned, this wasn't something that she was willing to put up with.
And when she broke up with Marcus at the end of January, prosecutors say it was like lighting a fuse on a time bomb.
Nikki was ready to end the relationship. And when you're talking about family violence cases, the most dangerous time is when the relationship is ending, because the control and power that the abusive partner has is about to end.
It finally sunk in that the relationship was over. Nikki was not going to take him back.
At that point, instead of letting Nikki walk away, Marcus decided that if he couldn't have her, no one else could either.
Prosecutors believe that after the Tuesday night confrontation with Floyd and Nikki, Marcus returned to Nikki's house.
She came back home around 4:30 a.m.
When Nikki returned to the house, Marcus was waiting on her.
Marcus, what are you doing?
Marcus managed to overpower Nikki and wrap his hands around her throat. He held his grip until she was dead.
With his adrenaline pumping, Marcus didn't realize his shin had smeared blood onto the passenger seat.
Then Marcus carved the obscenity into the side of her car.
Then he fled the scene and went back home as if nothing had happened.
The defense argues just because Marcus's blood was in the car doesn't prove anything.
Their story is a simple one, that we can't meet our burden, which is beyond a reasonable doubt, because the evidence or the investigation is insufficient to reach that burden.
Marcus claims that his blood must have gotten in the car from the other times that him and Nikki have had fights.
Prosecutors refuted this by saying the blood found in the passenger seat was bright red, indicating that it was fresh, as if it's only been there a day or two. And Marcus was seen with a wound on his leg.
When the jury retires to deliberate, it takes them just 30 minutes to return with a verdict. Marcus Scott is found guilty of first-degree felony murder.
Marcus was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Although Marcus received the maximum sentence for his crimes, Nikki's loved ones still struggle to deal with the loss that will now forever haunt them.
There's no winners when we come out of a trial like this.
Although I think that justice was served, I think that it's a lose-lose situation because now her children are left without a mom.
It's just a very, very sad experience, especially for her children who now have to grow up without their mother. And then the memory of such a violent way that they lost